ladies and gentlemen, we're live here with the Sports Gambling Education Webinar number 3 here Wednesday, September 16th in 2020. It is 2 p.m. Eastern. I am very excited to have you all here today. Before we get started, just want to welcome you all for joining. First things first, just a few thank yous. I want to thank my team here at Siena Education Services for helping wrangle our talent today and get everything up and running. Next, I definitely want to thank Matt Casciato and Jim Kaler at Ohio University for helping assist in putting this webinar together today. And of course, our team at US Integrity at usintegrity.com. Today, obviously, we are talking sports gambling. And for those of you that aren't aware, OU has launched these courses right now at sportsgamblingeducation.com. And just for attending today's webinar, you can use the promo code WEB916. That's WEB916 for 25% off any course or course bundle at sportsgamblingeducation.com. And that code is valid through October. A couple of quick housekeeping items. One, the first two courses of the package are now available. That is at sportsgamblingeducation.com. Our third course goes live this fall. In other news, if you're looking for past webinars, the first two webinars have been recorded and are live and available right now on our YouTube channel. That's Sports Gambling Education, again on YouTube. Additionally, we have now launched the Sports Gambling Education LinkedIn profile page. So the current students, if you are looking to add your certifications to your profile, you are now able to. So for example, my profile here on LinkedIn, I'm able to add license and certifications. And now when you hit that plus sign and you look for the issuing organization, you will see Sports Gambling Education pop up. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our hosts and our panelists of today's webinar. First up, Mr. Matthew Casciato. Matt is the Executive Director of the AECOM Center for Sports Administration at Ohio University, and he brings 23 years experience from the cable sports television industry to OU's distinguished Department of Sports Administration, which, as we all know, just took home the #1 ranking from Sport Business. Matt's television experience includes ESPN in both the LA and New York markets, ESPN headquarters, Fox Sports, the Yankees Yes Network, and American Education Television Network. He joined OU as an adjunct in 2016 and accepted a full-time position as a lecturer in August of 2017. And in addition to serving as the executive director of the AECOM Center for Sports Administration, he also serves on the Foundation Board of Recreation Unlimited and co-founded Blue Beautiful Skies, a nonprofit focused on raising awareness and funding for lung cancer research. Matthew, welcome.
Thank you very much, Scott. Great to be with you today and appreciate all your very hard work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And next up, David Preschlack, President, NBC Sports Regional Networks and Executive VP of Content Strategy at the NBC Sports Group. David was named President of NBC Sports Regional Networks and Executive VP of Content Strategy in February of 2019. In addition to continuing to oversee NBC Sports Regional Networks across the country, he contributes to the content strategy for NBC Sports Group's national properties. He serves as a principal in the division's media rights negotiations and has led strategy in the sports betting space. He oversees 9 NBC regional sports networks in top markets across the country and manages relationships with Major League Baseball, the NBA, and NHL team partners. He also led the entire NBC Sports platform strategy with existing and soon-to-be developed content. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Scott, thank you. Pleasure's mine.
Wonderful. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our panelists so they can begin the SGE webinar series, webinar number 3.
Great, Scott. Thank you again. David, really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And this is a unique topic. This is only our 3rd webinar, but we have covered a lot of different important areas for the sports gambling ecosystem, sponsorship, integrity and compliance, which is big for us, as our third partner on our course is US Integrity, who really is a leader in monitoring integrity and compliance education and services to multiple industries. So we've talked to some operators as well. We had Betfred on last call, but this is a really incredible area for us to talk about today because of how big NBC Universal is. And what I thought I would do to start, David, is take a look, from 30,000 feet, and over the course of our discussion, kind of work our way down closer to ground level to really see how you are implementing your gambling strategy. So again, first and foremost, you've got the regional sports networks. You've got the local and national NBC broadcast networks, and obviously you've got NBC Sports Network in the cable environment. So a lot of different platforms, not to mention your digital content online. So a lot of different platforms to work into your strategy here. And we haven't even uncovered some of the other entertainment assets in the portfolio. What's it like to try to manage a strategy, the gambling strategy, across all of this vast media verticals?
It's hard. It's hard. Before I dive into that, Matt, number one, great to see you. I think it's a mistake on both of our parts that it's not in our bios that I had the privilege of working for you. You broke me in as a salesperson back in 1997. But it's great to be with you, great to see you, and great to be part of this program. Listen, I think the way that I would answer your question is it's very difficult to navigate within a big company. And it's difficult for really two reasons. One is you have to deal with a lot of different stakeholders. And secondly, those stakeholders aren't always aligned. And particularly when you're dealing with stakeholders that are running their own individual P&Ls like I do, they're interested very much in the well-being of the entire company, but they're particularly interested in their lines of business that they're responsible for. And so when we tackled this broad space of sports betting, I was kind of lucky, and I was approached. It was pre the repeal of PASPA in February of 2018 by Mark Lazarus and Steve Burke, who tasked me with taking as big a swing as possible in the space. And obviously the space hasn't evolved to what it is today. And it was only a space that had gotten off the ground vis-a-vis brick and mortar. And so that was a good thing because they really charged me, and I was empowered to kind of figure out a strategy. And the strategy was really threefold. One is I had to really learn about the space. And I had to learn what PASPA was all about, what the chances were about PASPA being repealed, what the implications for that, the different areas of the sports betting business, how it could potentially roll out. It's a complicated space, and it continues to be a complicated space. And then what we wanted to do is we wanted to meet as many players in the space as possible. And we knew that certain casino operators were going to get in the space if PASPA was repealed. We obviously knew that DraftKings and FanDuel were going to get into the space. And then the third component, which was the most complicated component, was we had to figure out a strategy. And the beauty of it was at a high level, and this is probably higher than 30,000 feet, this is probably 130,000 feet. My marching orders were to take as big a swing in the space as possible for NBC Universal. And so we always kind of kept that in the back of our mind as we charted out a strategy and as we continue to chart out a strategy.
And again, at times, the portfolio of NBC Universal is so vast, but with the focus being on the RSNs specifically, let's start there. Obviously, I've spent a good amount of time in the RSN business. They are unique with a lot of moving parts, a lot of stakeholders. Teams and leagues are involved. So as we kind of break this apart and just think about the opportunities the RSNs present, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll talk at kind of a global level. our view is that sports betting for the time being, and this is not always going to be the case, for media companies is really a regional play. Sports betting companies can't advertise vis-a-vis 30-second spots nationally today. The industry is really following the horse betting model. And we need to get to a critical mass in terms of the number of states that are up and operational, particularly digitally, before media companies can accept 30-second spots. So it's really a regional business. For us, we were almost handed. I'd love to tell you that this was part of our grandiose strategy, but we were almost handed a first mover advantage. And by that, I mean, the minute that PASPA was repealed, almost, sports betting went up and running in New Jersey. And our regional sports network business in Philadelphia serves Southern New Jersey. And so we were immediately able, from a sponsorship standpoint, to transact with various sports betting entities. Number one, that was good for our advertising business. But number two, going back to what I said earlier, we were able to meet at a high level partners across the board in terms of the players that were getting into New Jersey. And if you just look at how sports betting has evolved since May of 2018 and to today, it almost overlaps serendipitously with our regional footprint, whether it be our broadcast stations or our regional sports networks. And we've tried to use that to our advantage. And one of the other things that we learned, Coach, was we learned that media matters, marketing matters. And we learned that because our advertising was effective, which was nice. One of the intricacies about dealing with sports betting partners is obviously very transactional in nature. Toyota is a very big advertiser of ours, but it's very difficult to kind of measure how many people watch a spot on one of our networks and go buy a Toyota. We're dealing with very sophisticated digital media companies who have a very good sense of how far their media goes in terms of people downloading apps, making first-time deposits, and then ultimately betting. And we were able to learn early days that we really had an effective tool set in our tool chest here to drive the business in this new category.
Great. And then, so as we look at that ecosystem, within each RSN, the team deals are specific to the marketplace. Some RSNs carry more team than others. They run across a number of leagues. What are those conversations like, within the regionals in terms of the rights that you hold from the various pro franchises?
Yeah, so really twofold, and you kind of hit on both of them. Start with at a league level. The leagues had to, once PASPA was repealed, figure out their play in the sports betting space. And before PASPA was repealed, they were going around on a state-by-state basis and trying to get a cut of the action vis-a-vis an integrity fee. They kind of course-corrected, and the leagues set up their own rules that we have to and had to abide by in order to take bets from certain sports betting companies. And whether that be a data relationship, whether it be a team relationship, whether it be a league level relationship, sports betting operators who advertise on our air have to have some type of relationship with the leagues or the teams. With the teams, and just in the event that people don't know, some of our team partners also happen to be equity partners in our regional sports network business. So we'll stay with Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Phillies own a piece of NBC Sports Philadelphia. And really, as that conversation has evolved, we do a lot of business together, and then they do some business separately, right? And the Phillies have done a deal with DraftKings, and we've done a recent deal with PointsBet. And we still transact with DraftKings and FanDuel. The PointsBet deal is a bit nuanced, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But a lot of our work with the leagues was centered around navigating how we could coexist. And regardless if the teams, not the leagues, regardless if the teams have equity in a regional sports network, we have a long-standing, very good working relationship with our team partners. And we just kind of had to figure out the lay of the land. We had to be upfront of how we wanted to participate in the space. So did they. And we just navigated it candidly like any other issue.
But again, it is such a complex universe, and just knowing your background and, having worked together at ESPN and some of the projects that you were involved in, some of the network rollouts, all complicated. Nothing's easy in business, but this one is, particularly complex, and the matrix builds just in the conversation that we're having here. So as a segue, let's talk about the points bet, because that's it's relatively new, and a lot of people are interested in it. And I know a lot of the folks that are listening today would like to kind of hear how that came about and how you ultimately got it across the finish line.
Yeah, so it probably makes sense to go back even further. And we had looked at one deal in the space that we ultimately passed on. And then we had pretty in-depth conversations with another potential partner that just didn't come to fruition. As I like to say, we went out on a few dates, but we just weren't the right match relative to the deal that we were looking to do and the deal they were willing to do. And that was really in the fall, almost into the winter. That took us really almost the fall into the winter of last year. And I kind of sat around a table and have a great working group working on this part of the business. And we all kind of agreed that, hey, we'd been singularly focused on figuring out a deal with a partner. And we'd had conversations with other partner, and some time had elapsed in terms of the space rolling out on a state-by-state basis, which gave us line of sight on how we could transact in the space. And what we ended up doing in the beginning of this year was we started off and kicked off an RFP process. And we met with a dozen or so potential partners literally over the span of 2 weeks. It's all we did for 2 weeks in New York City. And it was an opportunity for us to get to know potential partners that we didn't know. And it was an opportunity for us to better get to know potential partners that we had had a relationship with. And really what we did as part of that process as the space had unfolded is across both Comcast and NBC Universal, we communicated our vision of how we could transact in the space, of how we could activate our assets. And we also communicated our vision of how we wanted to participate in the space, both commercially and with respect to equity. And then around the March-ish, April timeframe, the process kind of whittled itself down in terms of us receiving offers, refining those offers, going back and having further conversations. And what we ended up doing is we went to a handful of potential partners, and this was a really important part of the process, at least for me personally. At that point, we were left with 2 or 3 potential partners, and what we communicated to them was, listen, we're looking to go because we wanted to figure out a deal and start executing on it in time for this football season. And we were looking to go into an exclusive negotiating period because we thought it was the best way to get a deal done. And we went back to these 2 or 3 potential partners. We said, listen, we really want your best and final as we look to go into an exclusive negotiating period. And that was a pivotal moment, not just for the negotiation itself, but really for us and for me reputationally. Because you can imagine the response that you get. It's like when you buy a house, right? Sometimes it's, hey, put your best and final, and then the Smiths or the Jones have upped you by this. And if you come back and it becomes a bit of a bake-off, we thought it was really important to have integrity in the process. And I made it a point to talk to my points of contact to communicate to them that this was not going to be a bake-off. I'm not going to come back to you. I really mean it when we ask you to put your best and final on the table. And we had, just for the group here, we had probably 3 main criteria that was part of our selection process as we chose PointsBet to go into the exclusive negotiating period. Number one is the commercial terms and the line of sight on equity was important to us. We're obviously looking for our company to drive as much value as possible. And those are the 2 ways that we're going to drive value in this deal. So the money's important. A little bit master of the obvious there, but that was a criteria for us. The second criteria for us was we were very focused on activating as many of our assets as possible, both regionally and nationally. We didn't want to work with a partner that was just focused on Philadelphia or just interested in Sunday Night Football if and when we get to that point. It was important for us as we try to build asset value over the long haul to activate as many of our assets as quickly as possible. And it was also an opportunity for us really to see how much thought potential partners put into their bids, how much thought, how much homework, and how creative they were, because that's important in any partnership. And then the third criteria, and honestly, this was probably the most important criteria. And by the way, there's more than one company that checked this box, right? PointsBet wasn't the only company that checked this box. There were multiple companies, if not all of them, that were in the final stages that checked this box, thankfully for us, was we wanted to feel really good about the people we were getting into business with. People matter. How people run an organization matter. How people problem solve matters. How people think creatively in a new and nascent space. How media savvy were people. But at the end of the day, how people deal with tough situations. How do you measure someone's integrity as part of the process? That was a really important thing for us because, at the end of the day, we've cut this deal. And it's interesting. We cut it at the end of August, and we literally started activating it on September 1st, literally. And so, there were a few days here to celebrate the deal, but we went into execution mode immediately. And all of the things that we thought that were important going into the deal, particularly with the team that we wanted to do business with, it was interesting. I was on a call out of the gates on September 1st, and it was like, thank God we paid attention to the details here in terms of, in this case, PointsBet's approach to the business, because it aligned very well with our approach. And so that was the criteria. And, as it relates to the deal making itself, I will just point out 2 quick things. One is, and you'll be able to relate to this, Coach, is that I have never negotiated a deal over Microsoft Teams or Zoom, notwithstanding a deal of this magnitude, and notwithstanding the fact that this is probably one of the most complicated transactions I've been a part of. And that was really interesting to me because I'm a big read the room type of person. It's harder just to kind of walk out of a conference room and caucus with your team. It's harder to kind of pull the deal lead from the other side out into another room and try to tackle the biggest issues or massage something that may have blown up over the course of the negotiation. Negotiating a deal over Microsoft Teams and Zoom was interesting. I don't think it was a challenge at times. The second thing that was a challenge, in many ways I feel for our friends at PointsBet, is that the person that I dealt with most of the time is based in Melbourne, Australia. And right now in Melbourne, Australia, it's almost 4:30 in the morning on Thursday. And so we had to kind of figure out a negotiating rhythm where, he wasn't, Sam Swinnell, the global CEO of PointsBet, wasn't getting up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, which was 6 o'clock our time. We had to just pay attention to the fact that we were dealing not just with Microsoft Teams or Zoom. We're dealing with a very, very pronounced time change, which was another interesting element in the negotiation.
So as much, deal making, experience that you just kind of uncovered for those that are with us today, as well as the actual blocking and tackling of the deal. But, as we kind of, focus on that, so, there's an equity stake we've heard, you were in business with an online operator. There's marketing components, I'm sure, the fact that you built the plane as it was flying, as the analogy goes, and then you really, were able to put it up as early as September 1st. But some of the other things that people are curious about is, how does it affect the sponsorship landscape and the advertising landscape and some of the other players in the industry? So I think when we spoke, in preparing for the call, there were some unique properties there that people will find interesting.
Yeah, so when we put together our strategy on with respect to the commercial component of this deal, out of the gates, when the RFP process kicked off, we were very, very upfront about the fact that we didn't want to do a fully exclusive deal. And so, as it relates to a lot of the commercial aspects of the deal, they're non-exclusive. The biggest place to point to is, as it relates to our advertising inventory, the tried and true 30-second spots, we have a very robust commitment from PointsBet, but we have the ability to sell to any and all other partners in the space up until our inventory allotment. That was really, really important to us, and it was something that we were able to negotiate. We wouldn't have done a deal without retaining that flexibility. I just don't think getting into an exclusive arrangement across the board was going to be the right thing for our company. And that, fortunately, over a very short period of time, because we continue to transact and have very meaningful relationships with others in the space, it just proved to be the right decision for us. What we did end up doing is there are some exclusive components to the deal, and they're surrounding a few different things. One is as it relates to our free-to-play game, NBC Sports Predictor, and the database that comes along with that. The other is with respect to certain digital assets that we have, but not all of them. For instance, pre-roll is going to continue to be sold non-exclusively. And then the other piece, which I believe is the most meaningful component of the exclusive part of our deal, is all of our content integrations are going to be exclusive to PointsBet. And so let me just kind of unpack that for a couple minutes. Number one is we're following league rules. The league has a point of view. They don't want our pregame show to turn into a sports betting show, nor do we, by the way. And number two is we've got a pretty deliberate approach to how we want to create content that we think fits within our sweet spot, which is really as a rights holder. Our beachfront property, the live events and the pre and the post surrounding those live events. And what we try to do is we produce 2-3 minute long segments, pre, intermission, and post. And we try to dissect the main storylines of the game like we always have, but then do so through a betting lens. And then those integrations, that's the best example of a content integration. The branding associated with those integrations is going to be exclusive to PointsBet. And we've been very deliberate about that.
Fascinating just the tracking and the measurement that your team has to do. You talk about your team, and just to kind of shift gears a little bit, you told us at the Open how you got up to speed, how you educated yourself, and pre-PASPA, started to see the field. How are you bringing your team along to build some expertise in them to best understand this new business you're going into?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, there was a team at Comcast Corporate that's now over at Penn National that had been looking at the space for a long time. And that helped us and me personally immensely. They knew a lot about the space. They knew players and potential players in the space. And so I could drink through the fire hose while at the same time take advantage of the fact that we really had subject matter experts internally. And we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today without that team at Comcast that's now at Penn National. I know we wouldn't have. And then, listen, I think it becomes, and Coach, this will resonate with you, one of our old bosses, George Bodenheimer, when you asked him advice when he was running ESPN, 9 times out of 10, he'd say, be a student of the business. And what I had to do was just set aside the requisite amount of time to try to understand this business. And that was through meeting people, and that was through taking advantage of the internal resources that I mentioned and other resources. And it just took time. And it was through things that were at my disposal online. It was something that I just had to carve out the requisite amount of time. And then, the team of people that evolved that ultimately did this deal on the NBC Sports side of things that really led the deal were folks that were just interested in the sports betting space. and they happened to be a collection of very high-powered executives, whether it be on the legal front or the business development front, or one of the deal leads was and is my CFO of the RSN business. And so we just had to be students of the business, come together, figure out be smart about what we knew, be probably smarter about what we didn't know, and then figure that out. And we all knew that it was going to be a steep learning curve. And, the best way to kind of get up the curve is one step at a time. I know it's a corny analogy, but that's what we had to do.
So staying on the learning, and I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to kind of open it up. I'm sure we've got some questions that are coming in from our audience today. NBC Universal has done a deal with Sky, and Sky has kind of been out in front, certainly in their European markets, and been very active, in the wagering and gambling space. Any learning there for you as of yet? Have you been able to interact or, gain some intelligence from, that relationship?
So it's so interesting that you mentioned that. To me, the playbook that U.S. sports betting companies are following, to a large degree, not to every degree, but to a large degree, is the Sky Bet playbook. And obviously, Sky was a partner in Sky Bet, still retains a small equity interest. And even before Comcast bought Sky, a team of us took a trip over and talked to both the Sky Bet folks in Leeds, England, and also the Sky folks. And so that was part of the educational process. Listen, there's some nuances between Sky Bet and how they executed on their strategy and ultimately sold their business for almost $5 billion. Obviously, sports betting is nationalized in the UK and in Northern Ireland, right? It's rolling out, as I mentioned earlier, on a state-by-state basis. But the essence of Sky Bet's success when they sold was they were able to attract avid sports fans who turned into casual bettors. And I think we're seeing the same thing happen in this country. So, and the reason I think that is if you unpack the data in New Jersey, which New Jersey's handle just surpassed Nevada's, the average bet's less than $20. That, to me, by definition, is the casual bettor. It's an avid fan who's just looking to make the game a little bit more interesting and entertaining. The analogy that I've been using for the better part of 2 years here, it's like, Coach, when you and I go out to dinner when you're in town, it's the glass of wine, maybe sometimes the bottle of wine, that makes dinner taste better. In this case, it's the glass of wine that's $20. And I think that's really where we focused. And it was integral to our approach when we kicked off the RFP process. And even before that, when we had individual conversations, it has been absolutely integral in our approach as it relates to the content we're creating. Because I've always thought in the back of my mind that, I'm not sure, and this is not to mean any disrespect to anybody, but when you learn that sports betting experts get things right only slightly more than 50% of the time, I'm not sure that's by definition a sports betting expert. And we don't want to be a tout service. We don't want to do that, and we don't need to do that, again, because of the beachfront property we have, the live event programming, the fact that we have pre and posts, and again, the fact that sports betting is rolled out in a way that overlaps beautifully with our regional sports networks and our other regional businesses. And so what we focused on was creating content that was going to incentivize the casual bettor to place a small bet to make the game more interesting. And that's how things are unfolding in New Jersey. And so I think that's going to continue to be our playbook going forward. And it gives us another opportunity to utilize and maximize the rights that we pay a lot of money for that are extraordinarily valuable.
Well, I know that, small casual bets served me well with some great NBC coverage of the Kentucky Derby on the Twin Spires app. But so one last question, and that is, as you look at all the activity in this space, and especially as it plays out across your networks, do you have a conversation about integrity, and really, with some of the jaded history and some of the past, problems that we've seen with the integrity of the contests? Is it something you talk about, inside NBC about just the confidence that these casual bettors can have when they come to come to the actual bet?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is what I would tell you on behalf of all the players in the sports betting space is that they are maniacally focused on responsible gaming. Absolutely. And obviously integrity is a big component of that. I would say for us, I would kind of say two things. Number one is we have self-policed ourselves in the number of sports betting ads that we take on our air. And the reason for that is we've looked at what's happened in the UK. There's other legislation that I believe has been passed in countries like Italy. And so whether it be self-imposed or actual legislation on prohibiting from whistle to whistle any sports betting ads, that's not obviously in our interest. And so we came out of the gates in New Jersey very conservatively. We had one sports betting ad every 30 minutes. Now we have two. And we think it's important to preserve the environment that we've created, not just for bettors, but for non-bettors. We think that's very important. And so I think that speaks to the integrity of how we were managing our ad inventory and just not chasing short-term dollars. That was obviously really important to us. And I think the second thing too is, as we thought about getting into the space, particularly from an equity standpoint, most sports books have or will soon have, other gambling businesses associated with their sports book. And they're iCasino businesses and social gaming businesses. They're actually higher margin businesses than the sports betting business. And so that's a bit of an added dimension for Comcast, NBC Universal. And it was something that we were on the up and up about all along. And before we did anything in the space, socialized with our chairman, Brian Roberts, to get him comfortable, even at the end when we got deal approval for the PointsBet deal.
I think we're going to try to go to Scott and see how we're doing in terms of the chat. Scott, you're measuring that. Just curious what we might have from our audience, and throwing to you.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you. First question comes from Mike Nemitz. Mike asks, speaking of the deal, will NBC be involved in the RFP vendor process with gaming regulators and or operators as new states and provinces approve expanded gaming legislation?
I think the short answer to that is, number one, that is outside of my core competency. But seriously, you listen, our equity interest in PointsBet, which is subject to shareholder approval, which we're hopeful and optimistic we're going to get here in the next couple of weeks, is going to be 4.9%. And so we as an entity, and this has implications up to Brian Roberts, are not going to have to get licensed. The fact that there are referral economics as part of our deal, and so by that I mean if in Chicago, which is now up and running as of last weekend, you go to our website and click on the PointsBet banner, download the app and deposit money, we are going to participate in some of those economics. We have to have those vendor licenses, and we've kicked off that process. And so there are varying degrees of licensing. You know, I think the beauty of the structure of the deal for us is, again, our initial equity is going to be at 4.9%, but we have line of sight a few years down the road to acquire at option pricing an additional 25%. And it's just going to give us time, and literally to the person, will give Brian Roberts time to figure out if he wants to go through the licensing process. And my view is the licensing process will evolve between now and then.
Excellent. Just so it's not, Scott, one quick point here, just so it's not lost on some of our audience members that might not know Brian Roberts, but he is literally at the top of what is Comcast and NBC Universal. So, when David mentions his name, it's all the way up. It doesn't get any higher. So I think it's just a sign of the integration and the importance and the overall involvement of the Comcast NBC.
Coach, I'll tell you a funny anecdote. So we've been negotiating this deal for 2 months. Very complicated. At one point we had a live drafting session for 8 hours straight. So there's a Word document up on the screen. Both sides are negotiating the document, the words, word by word. And we finally got to a point where the documents were done. And we obviously have an approval process. And with a deal like this, particularly because of the equity component, it need Brian Roberts' approval. And so we put together a deck for Brian. We sent it to him in advance. And we got on the phone with him, or we got on a Teams call, yet another Teams call. And we took him through the deal. And the end result of that conversation was, sounds great. Go ahead, clear to close. When do you think you're going to close the deal? And the way things were going, both parties were kind of motivated. We wanted to get up and running by the 1st of September, and there were some other factors as well. And I said to him, it's not inconceivable that we're going to sign the deal tonight. He started laughing. He said, well, what if I didn't give you the go-ahead to finalize the deal? I said, hey, don't worry about it. We've been very explicit about our internal process with our friends at PointsBet, and they know we're having this meeting, and they know that you have the ultimate say on whether or not we're going to go ahead with this deal. And we ended up closing the deal that night, on a Thursday night.
Again, just love the color in terms of what happens internally. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, Scott, who's next?
Yeah, we got a question from Eric Sonstagard. He writes in, David, do you maintain a constant awareness of the legal advocacy efforts in states like California? So like when a state crosses the finish line on regulation, what type of impact does that have on your RSNs in that state?
Yeah, we do. There's a lot, for instance, going on in the state of New York right now. And we're acutely aware of what may happen this year, or may be punted into next year. And states like California, New York, Connecticut, and there are other states are highly complex from a regulatory standpoint. So we have outside counsel that has their hands on the pulse. We talk to people outside our organization that are parts of other organizations to help advise us, but yes, it is a big part of what we do.
Great.
All right,
Scott?
Yeah, I got it directly from our Director of Sports Gambling Education, Jim Kaler. Jim asks, David, as you're looking into your crystal ball as to how you your teams that you deal with on NBC's regional sports networks, how will they benefit from sports gambling moving forward?
Yeah, I think in a lot of different ways. Number one, this is a new ad category for us. And it's a white hot ad category as sports betting companies try to get market share. It's highly competitive. We only have so much inventory to sell, and that's a good thing when we have multiple parties that are interested in buying our inventory. So from an ad sales standpoint, just relative to this category, that's been a very good thing from our business, literally right after PASPA was repealed, starting in Philadelphia, as I mentioned. So that's number one. Number two is we really believe, and we're seeing some anecdotal evidence. It's hard to pinpoint exactly the benefit that I'm about to describe. But if you have people more interested in outcomes during the game or the outcome of the game, we believe that more people are going to watch the game and people are going to stay for longer periods of time. And that's how ratings are measured. So there's obviously going to be a lift in our ratings. And then I think the third thing, Scott, is that, listen, from a content standpoint, we're not just dedicating resources within what I call our shoulder programming. We're standing up a content vertical regionally and nationally across NBC Sports to serve casual bettors. And we think, based on our first mover advantage, that we have the ability to do that, and our rights and our markets. We have the ability to do that better than anybody else. And so, just because we have transacted in the space for a long time, and obviously the PointsBet deal is a phenomenal deal for us. We couldn't be happier with the partnership and PointsBet as a partner. We haven't stopped swinging in the space. We are, and I forget when this was, there was a gaming conference, and I think I said something along the lines of, we're going to explore every avenue to participate in this space. And so that work hasn't stopped, and I'm not sure that it is ever going to stop. And so I think the three things that I mentioned are pretty foundational for us, but we're going to continue to look for ways to participate in the space in as many ways as possible that make sense for us.
Great. All right, well, just one more question before we start to wrap things up. And it's in regards to, I think, programming. And this one comes from Sean Burns. Sean Burns asks, what does NBC hope the impact of adding Warren Sharp will be?
Yeah, so we just hired Warren. Thank you for the shout out. We're very excited about having Warren. The question that I asked internally when the head of our gaming vertical came to me and wanted to hire Warren, I just want to know if Sharp is his real last name. Obviously has betting connotations, and I haven't really gotten an answer to that. A couple things. Warren is heavy into analytics. He's a trusted voice in the space. And we're going to let Warren be Warren, just like any other talent that we hire. But at the same time, as we talked to Warren and his agent, and as we ultimately made a decision to bring him on board, and by the way, as he ultimately made a decision to join us, Warren is very well regarded in the space and had any number of opportunities. We kept educating him on our approach, and it's a little bit different, right? The lane that we're trying to create for ourselves is a little bit different than the lanes that are already out there in the marketplace. It's much less being a tout service. It's much less just relying on data and analytics. Bryce Harper is batting .400 over his last 15 games, so he's going to have 2 hits tonight. Yes, it is those things, but we want to contextualize those things relative to the main storylines of the game. And so we're going to be looking to Warren and others that we hire and others that we have, to work with the folks that we have dedicated to the space to really figure out ways to give people reasons to watch the game a little bit differently through a betting lens, right? And to figure out how to talk about sports betting in a way that's going to raise the entertainment value of the game. And again, the last point I'll make on this, Scott, to me, that is not hiring Warren just to make picks every week. I like this because of this. No, that's to get Warren and others who are going to be talent for us with a capital T in this space to, yes, rely on data and analytics, but in many ways unpack both sides of a potential bet that ties back to the main storyline of the game, and then tell people what to watch for over the course of the game. If this starts happening, if this pitcher starts throwing low and away to Bryce Harper, that is a very good sign for him to get 2 hits tonight because he's a low and away hitter. But if he's throwing off speed up and in, that's where he's challenged. And so during the course of the game and during his at-bats, pay attention to these things because that's going to influence the outcome of this potential bet. But it's not just the potential bet. It's going to influence the outcome of the game because most of the people who bet on the Phillies are Phillies fans, particularly the casual bettors. And it all comes back to serving those fans. And we're not going to successfully serve those fans if we're just looking at things through an analytical lens, through just a betting lens, and if we're a tout service.
Great answer there, David. Okay, I've got a couple more quick ones, and then we'll start to wrap here. You mentioned lanes, and I think about swimming and swimming against others. And the pace in this space is incredible. You've got ESPN, and you've got Sinclair, who now owns all these regionals. And I'm just wondering, like we all do, you're peeking over in the lanes every now and again. You're wondering about their deals. You're not losing confidence in certainly your strategy, but that's got to take a lot of time. Who's watching the media marketplace develop across sports gambling for you guys?
We've got any number of people doing it with respects to all aspects of the space, both from a content standpoint. And ESPN recently announced a series of deals this week, and I must have received 10 emails making sure that I heard the news about the announcements that they made. So, we've had to have people evolve as executives, and on the content side of things, instead of hiring from the outside, our head of content came internally, and high potential employee, very smart person. And we asked him, hey, are you interested in this space? Yes, it's a growth area. It looks like something that I can get my arms around. And it became ensconced in what everybody's doing. It's the reason we hired Warren Sharp, because there's so many different component parts to creating good content. And so, yeah, we pay attention to what others are doing, of course. But at the same time, particularly as it relates to the rights that we have regionally and nationally, there's no one size fits all here for any media company, much less us.
And I'll end just, on a personal passion of ours. We have played a couple of rounds of golf together. Wingfoot is not far down the road, and I know you said that you're not going to be able to go to the event, but who do you like this week? And does the course win?
Yeah, I think the course is going to win. The winning score is definitely going to be over par. Before I give you my pick, Coach, I just hope that you've noticed, that I have one of Ohio's favorite sons over my shoulder here, and Jack Nicklaus, who's looks like he's collecting a $100 bill from Arnold Palmer. So I've had that up in my office for a long time. I think I would pay attention to, I like Xander Schauffele. I don't think that's a really bold pick. I think, as it relates to bold picks, Terrell Hatton, I really like. It's got to be somebody who hits the ball straight. And Lord knows, as you know, that is not me most of the time. But on a side note, we're getting the U.S. Open back after several years without it. We couldn't be more thrilled to have it back. And it's not because, we had the U.S. Open for decades. I believe, we'll tie it back to the betting conversation, golf is going to be one of the marquee sports in the sports betting space, particularly in round action. And, we have a very robust golf portfolio. We just extended our deal with the PGA Tour. We have the Open Championship. We have the Ryder Cup, and now we have the U.S. Open. And so couldn't be more thrilled. Course is going to win. I think I heard, you hear all these rumors, particularly because the course is about a half hour from my house. The superintendent doesn't think it's hard enough, and his goal is for +8 to win.
Oh, well, that does not sound like fun for the pros out there, and it would be murderous for us. I would be remiss if I didn't comment on the picture behind you, because Jack and Arnie met for the first time ever in Athens, Ohio, at Athens Country Club, at the invitation of Dow Finsterwald, who was the longtime pro at Athens and also a PGA champion himself. And that's the first time those two gentlemen met. So as historic a place, we think, as any in golf, even though it's a 9-holer, it is a true test of golf and a Donald Ross track, and marked by an Ohio official state of Ohio historical marker. So that's not lost on me. Cannot thank you enough for taking this time. It's such a timely moment for us to be together as you move into this space. We wish you all the best as the current challenges pass us by. Look forward to having you meet more members of our team from Siena and U.S. Integrity. And as always, we'll have our eye on NBC Sports.
Coach, thanks, and congratulations on what you're a part of at OU. Congratulations on everything that you've done for the program and the students. It truly is a best-in-class program, and I wish you, Annie, and the kiddos, your 3 beautiful daughters, nothing but the best.
Same to you. Have a great day.
All right.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. So, guys, don't forget, check out sportsgamblingeducation.com. And as I was mentioning at the top of the webinar, there are quick links to the new YouTube channel and the LinkedIn profile. If you want to follow there, you can access this webinar will be posted to that YouTube channel. You can see it in the top right navigation of the website. So go follow that. And again, you're able to add your OU Sports Gambling Education certification to your LinkedIn profile after you finish each course here through LinkedIn. And finally, for all of our attendees of the webinar, thank you so much for attending. As a token of our gratitude, again, use discount code WEB916 for 25% off of any course or course bundle for sale right now at sportsgamblingeducation.com. Gentlemen, thank you again, and thanks everyone for attending.